All right, we're back and live. We are WEBD6201. That is client-side scripting in the winter 2020 semester here at Durham. And we're going to do a couple things. I want to talk about what we did last week. So last week we covered more DOM manipulation, right? That's what we kind of covered last week. We talked about JavaScript events. We're going to kind of look at that again. We also talked about and reviewed what an IFE is, right? An immediately invoked function expression. You should know that by now. Like that, we've covered it a couple times. I will ask you to do this on next week's test. We're also going to talk about the test next week. So for the people who came in just now and the people in the back, hello, right? Test next week. It'll be, so for the test, just to give you guys a heads up again, it won't be next week on Monday. It'll be next week on Tuesday during the Tuesday time slot for you guys, right? And for the other section, it'll be on the Thursday time slot. Okay, so that's the test next week. We're going to be covering site structure. There'll be just like we did the lab. A lab is a good practice for the test, all right? So the test is going to use the same site structure that I've asked you to do for the lab. In fact, doing the test will feel like you're doing like an in-class lab, something that I've got you guys to do kind of before. We also talked about different ways of writing functions. I'm going to kind of review that again. We also discussed variable scope, and I talked about var versus let versus const, which is kind of an intro into ES6, ECMAScript 6 anyway, which we're kind of talking about today. We also use the use strict directive, which puts JavaScript into strict mode, if you want to call it strict mode. And then some looping syntax that I recorded on my last lecture. We also talked about Git and GitHub in the second lecture, which was on last Tuesday. So that's kind of what we discussed last week. Any questions around this stuff? I know some people had some funny questions around DOM manipulation in terms of making connections with our elements, and I want to go over that again. One thing I also want to talk about today, beyond some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about here, is forms, and we have to still talk about forms, how to deal with forms, how to get responses from forms, all that kind of stuff. However, I have to tell you that forms are always best when we have some kind of data with AJAX, and we'll talk about that a bit. So that's when we deal with AJAX, we do forms as well. So this week, what are we doing? We're going to be talking about what is ECMAScript, and I kind of talked about it already. We're going to look at ES5 syntax. What is that? What is ES5? What do the versions mean and all that stuff. ES6 syntax, more about let, const, and arrow functions. We're going to talk about those things. And some additional features of ES6 over the next day or two. Object-oriented programming techniques with ES5. What does that look like? OOP with ES6. What does that look like? And I've already kind of touched upon that. I'm just going to go back and do it again, right? And then how do I split code among multiple files? So I have a bunch of different code. I mean, it becomes unwieldy to kind of have one big, kind of code base. I'd like to split things over different files. A lot of times we do this because it's easier to maintain, right? Because, I can give one file to one person, one file to another person, and it'll be easier. And then due this week, Lab 1, which is due Friday, this Friday, January 24th at midnight. I think that's the same day Picard is coming out. I don't know. I'm a Star Trek fan, right? But I believe that's when it's happening, right? So, try and get it done early if you're a Star Trek fan, so you don't feel pressured to do my lab as opposed to watch the show. Okay, and today we have Bill Nye, and we can't be there because we're all here, right? So questions around the stuff that we're doing this week and the stuff we did last week. Anybody have any questions? Burning questions. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Last week, we kind of did, actually, let me go back up on GitHub. I shared my files with you guys on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/Durham Programmer, there's a couple of lessons that I kind of put up on GitHub. So here's 2A and 2A2, that's you guys. And then I put up 2B, and that was for the other section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with one of these from last day. Let's start with 2B. You guys didn't even look at 2B, so let's please download 2B. So go up on GitHub and you grab this file from Durham Programmer. So we're on the same page. So everyone's got the same stuff, the same start point. So if I go here, remember how we can do this? We can simply go to that link, and let me just put that link up on Blackboard, the one or Blackboard, on DC Connect. I'll be okay. Learning systems abound. Okay, so this link here is what I want you guys to grab. So again, if I go to DC Connect, and let's go to week 2 for you guys. And I am recording this one, and I will put up the recording as normal. One thing about the recordings is if you go to course resources, you'll see that there's a YouTube playlist. So if you ever want to find the recordings for this class, just go to resources and go to YouTube playlist, and you're good. Like, you'll have all the recordings of this class. You can even watch it live if you're not physically able to attend kind of that week for whatever reason. Important times to attend are times when we're having tests. It's mandatory, you have to be here. But if you can't make it, then I totally understand. I know that GitHub repo to download. Okay? So that's week 3. So please go up on week 3's, grab that repo to download, which will take you to this link right here. You click download. As an example, I'll do the same thing to show you how it's done. Put it to downloads, and I'm going to show you that it also gives you something called master. So here's my downloads, and I'm going to open this up when done. And actually what I'll do is instead show in folder. Let's open it up with File Explorer. And what I want to do is I want to extract, usually with 7-zip. I highly recommend you guys get 7-zip. I think it's an easier way to download stuff. I know some people are still using the Windows decompression program or whatever. I don't recommend that. So if you extract to this, it'll actually extract it to the master. It says master. Master means master branch. And so we kind of talked about that briefly last week, different branches. And there's my code, right? It's that simple. So let's grab this and put this on my desktop, which is getting pretty cluttered and messy. I promise I'll clean it up one day, Mom. And then let's just put it out here again. So there it is. And this is what I'm going to start with. And every time we start, I'll be starting you with the starter from now on. I'm not reinventing the wheel and starting, from scratch yet again. That's just wastes too much time, and I want to get going with more and more code. Yeah.
On the test, will we have a starter?
Absolutely. I'll give you something to start with, because it doesn't make sense for you to download all this stuff, connect, get yarn, da-da-da. Why? Right? You've already done that in the lab for me, right? So I'm just going to give you a starter, and I'll say, from this starter code, go and do this, whatever this is, okay? And again, it's not going to last it's not going to take 2 hours of your time, okay? That's not my intention, to kill you with, with a lot of stuff for you to do. Okay, so let's go into this one. And notice I have this little package as an example, and I'm going to be using this to start. Now, what I want to do here is I'm going to put this up, but I'm going to rename this thing, because now that we got this file, right, you can also do the same thing. Instead of calling it lesson 2B, let's call it lesson 3A, right, which is what this is going to turn into. Lesson 3A, which is you guys. And then I'm going to just open up Visual Studio Code. And again, I'm just trying to make it so that we're all on the same page here. So here is VS Code. I'm just going to drag and drop into here. And then we're good to go. This is lesson 3A. Now there's some stuff to change. I got to tell you this. There's some stuff to change. Whenever you take a project that was something else, and now this is called lesson 3A, and we have a package.json file that says, well, that's lesson 2B. Change it. Instead of lesson 2B, change this to 3A. So update your package.json file so it says the right stuff. Right? I mean, it's not super important because at the end of the day, it's not like you're going to share this package with anybody else. This is also lesson 3, just to make sure we're on the same page. The rest of the stuff, I mean, really is the same. Right? So none of this is going to change. Okay? So this is pretty good. So that's one thing. readme.md also says lesson 2. Let's just change this to lesson 3 in both places. Again, just to be, for completeness. There's the only reason why I'm doing this is literally for completeness, not because by any means that I have to do this. Even if I ignored it, I don't think anyone would really, none of you would really complain, right? So that's it. So now we're ready to go. Are you with me? Are you to download the files? Do you have it installed on VS Code? Are you good? One thing we should look at before we start is my app.js, which is a little bit of a mess, right? And we should clean some of this stuff up. One is I use strict. So this directive is kind of funny because it's quotation marks and a semicolon. And when people look at this for the first time, they're like, wait, quotation marks and a semicolon, and that's a directive for JavaScript? Yeah. Use strict is one of the only directives that I've ever known that looks like this. But what it does is it prevents things like, having variables assigned to something without them being declared first, and a bunch of other stuff. It enables strict mode. So I highly recommend if you're doing vanilla JavaScript, which is what we're doing here, or even jQuery, to have use strict in the top of your JavaScript application. And for your test next week, it'll be there. Use strict. We also define this h2 tag here, like last time, and a couple of event handlers. That's what these were. And this is where I wanted to share some of the data with you. Last time we had a problem, kind of connecting. So remember I said that there's an insert before function. Here's how it would work. First of all, what I want to do here with the insert before function is I've got an h1 tag already. So if I look at the HTML, here's the HTML stuff that we kind of had, very similar to what you did. In the HTML code, you can see that I have a h1 tag with a display of 4 that says hello world, right? I'm going to put my JavaScript side by side. So you can do that by clicking this button right here on the right, which kind of splits your screen. And what I want to do with the right side, I'll keep it HTML. On the left side, it'll be JavaScript. So here, on the left side of my screen, I'm going to go into my solution, my project, and grab my app.js so we can see it. And you can see now we have stuff on the left and some things on the right. If I had a larger, more real estate, I would use both sides of my screen plus my browser. I have a pretty big display at home. And sometimes 2 displays when we code, especially when we do things for the web. We want a couple of displays to kind of code and or do something. And then this would be plenty big enough to do what I'm doing here. But if not, you can always move these around, right? So if you want to look at one side or the other. So if we look at the left side here, and if I scroll down to where we're starting off, first we make a connection to the content area. And then this is just review. So the way we make a connection, and some people are still iffy around this, no pun intended, right, is we have a variable that we call content area, right? So this variable, what it does is it holds a reference. It's almost like it binds to the UI element on the HTML side, right? That's why you should think about it, right? So whenever I do, there's different ways of binding, and I'm going to show different methods again from a DOM perspective. One of them, and the most common one that I've ever seen, is get element by ID. Get element by ID, you use an ID attribute to connect and bind your element that's physically on the HTML side over here to some kind of variable that represents that element on the JavaScript side. Okay, so again, I'm just reiterating here. I'm just like going through this yet again, okay? So example, content area is going to try and find an element on this side of the page. And by the way, see how I said that? It's going to try and find an element. What about if that element doesn't exist? What do you think will happen? If I'm trying to find an element on this side of the page and then there's no element that says content area, what do you think will happen? Yeah. Yeah, it'll be a null reference error actually. So that's a problem. Actually, it'll error out, and the rest of your code, once JavaScript finds an error, the rest of your code is non-functional beyond that point, which means that it'll run up to line 27. As soon as it hits line 27, the rest of your code is absolutely useless. Just letting you know, that's how JavaScript works. So right now, on the right-hand side, so this is the way we're connecting. On the right-hand side, we have a thing called, again, here's my content area, and content area is looking for an ID. I just named it the same thing. You can name it whatever you want. but it's looking for an ID, something, any element with an ID of content area. In this case, it's the div tag. So this div element, remember, the reason why this is the way it is, this div element has another node inside of it, an h1 element, and it also, the h1 element has a text node inside of that, which is hello world. That's the kind of the hierarchy that we're talking about here, right? So when I make a connection or a reference in my content area on the left with my content area in my HTML here, right? Literally, it has a reference to this div tag and everything inside of it. Okay, so that's what we did. So this content area variable represents then this whole div tag right here. That's what it represents. One thing is kind of representative of the other. Okay, good. So that's the first thing. And then what we want to try and do in our DOM, using the kind of in-memory elements, or almost like a virtual DOM is what we're kind of creating, right? Slowly, is we create elements. So again, I've created a variable up on the top that says h2. Let h2 kind of declares the variable. It doesn't know what type of variable it is, because remember, JavaScript is loosely typed, and it won't know what this variable is until I assign it a value. And so at this point here, when I'm hovering over it at line 7, it doesn't know what h2 is. It has no idea. That's why it's giving me a value of any. I don't know the type, it says, right? All you've done is, it's like me saying, well, I don't know, here it is, and it's assigned to nothing. Remember that in JavaScript, I cannot explicitly assign a type to a variable without assigning a value, okay? They must go hand in hand. So when I do this and I come down to this point, it says, okay, well, h2 is of type any, and now I want to create an element. So the create element method, it actually creates an element of type, whatever it is, h2 in this case, and returns the element as an object and stores a reference to it inside this h2 variable. So now h2 has what looks like an h2 tag. And by the way, because at this point on line 30, h2 has no attribute. It has nothing inside of it. It's literally an empty h2 tag, right? That's what this looks like. Okay, cool. And then I come down to the next line. Now that I have it, I can set attribute on it. Set attribute, by the way, will work on any HTML element. So for example, if I want to take the content area and kind of use the dot set attribute method, I can do it. And on any other attribute, I can set attribute. Any attribute you want. Attributes are on the HTML side are anything that's like a class or an ID or a value of any kind, width, height, title, whatever it is. Those are all attributes. The element itself starts with a less than sign and a keyword, and then ends with a lot of times a greater than sign, or it ends with a closing tag that looks like this. So sometimes it requires a closing tag, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes, like for example, there's some tags that don't require a closing tag. I just don't have an example of one right here. Okay. A meta tag actually is a good example. So here's a meta tag, and you can see that the meta tag closes off, but there is no closing meta tag. And some of them are like that. Okay. But for the most part, you have an opening and a closing. And there's another one, link. The link tag has an opening tag, and you have some attributes in the middle, HTML, and then you have the closing tag. That's what this closing part, with no closing tag, like a / link. All right, so going back to this then, whenever we get a reference, we get a reference, and then what I'm doing here is I'm actually creating the tag in memory, and I'm setting my attribute. So now, at this point on line 32, by line 32, my virtual h2 tag that I have in memory, I haven't added it to my page, has an attribute of class, display6. Display6 makes the font much smaller, and that's just display6 is a class that comes from Bootstrap, because we're using the Bootstrap framework. Remember, we're not doing CSS in this class, and we're not doing kind of HTML. That's where we're using Emmet for shorthand to quickly scaffold out our HTML pages. We can do that because we're worried about JavaScript here. So that's the attribute, and then it still doesn't have anything inside of it, but we set the text content inside of the h2 tag to a secondary header. That's what it's going to be called. So that's what our h2 tag has up to this point. And then, in order for us to add this h2 tag we just created in memory onto the page, we need to use append child. That is one way we can do it. We can also use insert before. There is no insert after. There just isn't. Okay? There's insert before. Okay, and then we went on last week and we set up some event listeners. We talked about event listeners last week and how they work using the observer pattern, right? Again, this is language agnostic, what I'm talking about. The observer looks at a subject and it looks for a specific event to be triggered at the subject. So for example, in this case, the observer is an event listener and is listening for a click event on the subject, which is the H2 tag. The subject is the H2 tag. So we're listening for a click event on the H2 tag. Cool. And then the observer has some subscribers. The subscriber in this case is the event handler, which in this case is inline. This is an example of an inline event handler. The reason why it's inline is because we have an anonymous function coming after the comma, and it's written like this. Now, it's kind of ugly, and a lot of people don't like this. If you're a programmer, you're looking at this and you're like, that's pretty ugly. Like from a function, from a JavaScript perspective, it's anonymous, there's no name to it, and it's triggering right here. The challenge with this is it can only be accessed once. I can never come back and do this event handler again. So if you're never going to do this event type again, then you make it anonymous like this. That's kind of the standard. However, if you're going to use it again, then it's better to make a named event handler, which I did for the mouse over and the mouse out functions. Okay, that's what I did for that. Again, I'm not saying that they're going to ever be used again. I'm just saying that I've just tried to give you guys examples of how that looks. So that's the observer pattern. It kind of responds, and the event handler is also called a callback function. Those are the two names for it, callback function or an event handler in this case. Okay. So the event is triggered when the click happens, and the event handler responds to the click. If there was nothing inside of this, it would still be a response. It would just be a blank response. Also, one thing I did is I used the ternary operator, and you guys should see this. You guys should have detected this. The ternary operator basically is, here's some kind of condition. If the condition is met, if it's true, then anything after the question mark, black in this case, is returned as the value that I'm going to assign over here. However, if this is false, anything after the colon is going to be assigned. That's just a pattern we've seen across different languages, Java, C#, C++. The ternary operator is a C-influenced structure that we've seen across different languages. Swift as well now. Okay, so that's what we did there. We made a couple of event listeners, and the named event handlers are up here, where we change things to green and 80 pixels and black and 32 pixels. And if I was to run this thing, remember we talked about running things live? You can use control backtick to bring up your terminal. Let's do it together. So control backtick, and if I type in light-server, if everything is configured properly, and hopefully by now it is, that you guys have everything configured properly. That's the assumption that I'm going to make. I'm going to click light server. I'm going to enter it. I'm going to come to this. This is what you should see. So here's some stuff that's happening. If I hover over my H2 tag, I can get this secondary header. If I hover out, it goes back to normal and changes to black. And that's what that piece of code does. It's not really beautiful what it does, but it works. So this becomes green 80 pixels, and then when I hover out, it becomes black 32 pixels. So it changes the style back to what it was or something else. And if you don't like 80 pixels, if you think 80 pixels is too big, you can always make it smaller. I just made it dramatic. So if I change it to 60 pixels now, you can see when I hover over, it's not quite as big. And that's kind of maybe a little bit better. All right, so that is mouse over and mouse out, and these are examples of named event handlers as opposed to anonymous event handlers that are inline. Okay? So that takes us down to about line 43. All right, and then I said, well, wouldn't it be neat, and I did this on the video last week, so you may have not seen it, wouldn't it be neat if I installed a first paragraph, and I want to do this before my H2 tag, right? Because one of your labs, I said, what I want you guys to do is between the about us and contact us, I want you to put some kind of human resources link. That's what I said. Inject this new link, human resources, between these two things. And we need to insert before to do that. That's one method. So what you have to do is kind of determine the parent node. And there's different ways of doing this. One way is I created a new variable called parent div. You could have called this anything. And the parent div tag is the parent, in this case, of my H2. My H2 parent node this points to the parent div tag, and so I store a reference to it in parent div. And this is where it can get quite confusing. Hell, even I got confused last week. I was like, wait a minute, I'm not stuck. I don't know. I can't remember how to, and then I figured it out when I left. I was like, it was killing me. You know, whenever you code and you leave and you're like, damn it, I knew what it was, and it kills you and it bothers you all night. It was one of those, right? Because it was so dumb and so easy. So what does this do? Let me print this out. So if I do a console log here, and I want to show you what the parent div looks like, parent div, right? Just for a second, if I press save, and then let's bring up the console. So I'm going to bring up inspect, and I'm just going to bring it up so you can see it on the right side. You can see that the parent div is exactly that, this thing. Right, so here's my parent div. But guess what? It also includes all of this. Look, it includes all this stuff too. So even though I'm pointing to the parent div is this, it returns this, but it also contains everything else. So that's something to note. Right? When it returns something from you, it returns everything, including all the subnodes. Okay, so that's what the parent div does. That's what this parent node does. It returns everything that's the parent of the H2. The H2, right, is down here. So its parent is the div tag, but the H2 is also in it. And that's the way it works in JavaScript. All right, so that is this H2 parent node. And I don't have to print that out anymore. I just want to show you what it was. And then I can say that, well, I want to take the parent div, this one, insert before, and I want to insert this new paragraph that I made up here called first paragraph. Here's my first paragraph with some little simple content. This is the first very short paragraph. And then I inserted it before the H2 tag, which is, I'm kind of referencing it twice, right? In fact, I could have rewrote this thing without using the parent div, h2.parentNode.insert before first paragraph h2. That's how it would be written, because parent div just represents this notation. That's all it is. It's almost like a shorthand or an alias, if you will, by doing this, right? So that's how you do insert before. And so I've given you the code, so when you do your lab 1, this is a pattern you can use. Make sure that you include the element that you're including before, dot parent node before the insert before, and you're good to go. Okay? All right, so yes, I inserted a parent node or a paragraph, and then I went along and I said, wouldn't it be nice if I found another way of getting my tag? And remember, you can also get elements by tag name as opposed to get element by ID. If you get elements by tag name, anything with an S at the end, get elements, get classes, or whatever it tells you to do with an S, it means I'm returning a collection of HTML elements. So that means an array. I'm getting an array back. Okay, well, I don't want an array. I want only one element. I want the first H1 tag. So I'm looking at the 0th element. We use in arrays 0-based counting, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever. And even though if there's only one element, it's still going to return it as if it's as part of an array. It'll be a single, kind of an array with a length of 1. That's what it's going to return. But I don't care for the array. I want the value of the first element of the array, and so I use these square brackets to get that. Is it ugly code? Yes, it is. Does it work? Yes, it does. So do it this way. Okay, that's the way to do it. However, if you really want to, just saying, right? You could loop through. You could create a for loop. And you can say for every element inside of the H1 array, I would have renamed this to H1 array. All the H1 tags on the screen. Let's say I had more than one of them, right? And then what you can say is I want to loop through and I want to choose the first one. Same thing, if you really want to. There's many ways to do the same thing, of course. All right, so then I created another paragraph. Here's something else. Another paragraph, but I wanted to clone the first paragraph. You can't just make another paragraph equal to the first paragraph, because all that's happening is you're doing this. C++, I'm going back to C++ example. If I say that, this pointer is pointing at that pointer, all I'm doing is I'm just pointing at the other item. It's a call by reference more than anything else. It's not a value thing. So if I say like, my paragraph, this new variable is equal to another paragraph, first paragraph, and if I was to say, if I just do this part, without the clone node part, then what ends up happening is that another paragraph is effectively the first paragraph. It's the same thing we're talking about. It's almost like they're pointing to each other, right? Which is not my intention. I want to make a new paragraph, based on the old one, right? And maybe sometimes we want to do those things for a couple reasons. One, I want to copy all the attributes. Maybe there's a bunch of classes and stuff. Yeah.
So you're just saying that the default for JavaScript is by reference instead of value there?
In this case, yeah.
Oh, just that case.
Well, yeah, in this case for sure. And most of the time. Because remember, each object in JavaScript is really an object more than anything else, right? So in this case, I'm making a reference from one, because these items are all nodes. So in this case, when I'm saying, well, this thing that I'm pointing at is a node. Now, if I took this away, I want to show you this. So let's suppose I'm just going to comment this out, which I can totally do, and put a semicolon there. And I'm just going to comment out so I make this paragraph is equal to this, and then I say, well, I want to go before the h1 tag and insert this other paragraph. But it's not going to insert anything. It's actually going to move the first paragraph above the h1 tag. That's what's going to happen. And the one that was before the h2 tag is going to be gone. Or it's going to appear to be gone, right? I'm also going to comment this out for 1 sec, just to see how this works. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back out to the page, and then you can see that there's only one paragraph now, and it's sitting above the h1 tag. Where's the other one? Well, there isn't another one. I haven't made a copy. I'm actually pointing to the other one, pointing to the same one. However, if I do this, the same code, but if I just go back and just go clone node like this, by taking that away and press save, now you're going to see that I have two. I've taken the first one and I've cloned it, and I made a brand new item with all the exact same configurations and attributes as the first one. So why is this good? So imagine what you want to do for your lab. You take the entire thing, which is your li with an anchor tag and an I tag inside of that. That's a lot of typing. You have to type all that stuff up. But if you copy one node, if you clone it, then I can just easily change the attributes. That's much easier than if I go in there and then recreate it by hand. That's way more difficult because I have to create 3 different things, link one thing to the other thing. It's too much. So hint, hint, this might be a good way of cloning a node that already exists. And then once you clone it, modify the attributes. It's much easier to do that than to create a brand new thing, right? Okay, so yeah, so that's what this is. And then I had this little part right here. I said let UL, if I want to get a reference to my UL, right, which is right here. Okay, so this is my scope. I want to get a reference to my UL, so my unordered list, and that means this UL up here. The first UL is what I want to get a reference to, this one, this whole thing, right? So here's what I want to do now, and this is, I kind of completed this last time, but I didn't upload the final version for this specific reason. Now remember, get elements by tag name means I'm going to get an array of UL elements, but I only want the first one. So I'm going to put this square bracket 0, which means look at the 0th element, is the 0th index of that array, and return whatever's in there as a value and store it inside of this variable called UL. That's what it's going to be, right? Okay, so once I've done that, then that's cool. So now I should have a reference to this UL, which is this part right here. Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to hide the last element of my UL, this one. My last child. How do I do that? Hide the last child. So I don't want to get a reference to contact, even though I made IDs for everything here, which is a good practice. Whenever you make a navbar, if you put IDs for all of your links, you have direct control. I can hook into them with get element by ID. However, if let's suppose I didn't have an ID here and I wanted just to get the last element, there's a couple ways to do this. I could do it so that I get the number of child nodes. I look at child nodes. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. I'm just going to kind of kill this thing for a second so we can see this one in its full screen glory. If I console out, if I do a console log, and I want to see what that UL element has inside of it, and I go back here, you can see that the UL element here shows every list item that's in here. Right? This is what I'm seeing on the right-hand side. So it's basically returning the UL itself plus all the list items. Okay, so I want this contact list item to disappear. I want it to be hidden, right? How do I hide stuff in CSS? Does anyone remember? How do I do that? I want to hide stuff. It's actually display, right? Display is equal to none. That's how you do it, remember? Okay, so I want to say display is equal to none for this last contact item. That's what I want to do. I want to not display this thing. but I need to get a hook into it. Now, I'm going to assume that I do not have an ID called contact. If I did, I can literally just go, well, document.getElementById ID contact, and then .display is equal to none, and then we're good, we're done, right? But let's suppose you don't have access to it, you want to get the last element. So I can use a couple things to get there. So let's look at, what about if I want to say ul dot, and if you look through here, and I want to look at, I start typing child, right? And there's a couple things I can look at. I can look at child nodes. I can look at children. Both return different things. This one returns a node list. This one returns a HTML collection. There's two different things here. And what I could do is I can loop through them. Let's see if I can loop through them. I kind of covered this on the video last time, but let's do it today with you guys. There's a couple of looping mechanisms we can use. One is a simple for loop. And if I type the word for and press tab, it kind of does the right one. It does, I'll be okay. I want to do this one. There's different options that come up. So I want to do the second one. And if I press tab, then it does this. It actually fills it in for me, right? So I want to say, well, for let, notice the let came in there, index is equal to 0, where index is less than some kind of array, ul dot, let's try ul dot child nodes. ul dot child nodes, so this is an array, dot length. All right, so however many child nodes this this unordered list has, I want to get the length of that, and if index is less than that list, increment. And what I want to do now is whatever this thing is, I want to console let out. So console.log, and I want to print out that item. So it's going to be ul.childNodes and then index, right? That's what I want to show. First of all, please stop me if you don't understand what I'm doing. So I'm looping through each of the child nodes for child node length. So for example, if I had, in this case, 5 child nodes, right? I have a home, products, services, about us, and contact us. 5 nodes, right? Inside of my UL. I should be able to see all of these nodes when I loop through. But however, you're going to notice there's different effects. Let's see what we get. So if I save this and go back out, you can see now I get something that looks like this. And I get this kind of garbage text file here. Look at this. I get this like weird text decorator. Look at this. Are you seeing this? That's kind of weird, right? Hashtag text. And it's almost like it describes the object, which is a text object, and it describes each object first. It says, okay, so this is a hashtag text object. It gives me some information about it. It says that the parent node is ul.navbar-nav.mlauto, and it gives me a node list, because it can also have its own child nodes, right? It tells me what the next sibling is. This is interesting. li hashtag home.nav item active. That's the next sibling, right? So it has a lot of information. It has first child and last child and so on, right? So that's this. And then it gives me the actual item itself, right? So that's kind of interesting too. If I go to the next hashtag text, it does the exact same thing for the next item, for this products item. That's the previous sibling is home, the next sibling is products, and I'm looking at the next item kind of on the list, right? But these don't really help me. And if you notice, child nodes gives me funky stuff back. It's used for other things. However, what if I go back here and change child nodes to children? So I have both, right? I have a node list and a HTML element collection. Those are two different things that it returns, right? So if I do this now, you can see that this is an HTML collection, right? The other one was an HTML node list. If I save this and go back, now I have something different, right? I have a nav item active, right? A home and products, but I don't have about and services and all this other stuff. Why? Why is that? What's happening here? That am I losing nodes? Am I losing my mind? What's happening? Like, why is this going on, right? And you have to understand what's going on here, because what I'm telling it to do is exactly what it's saying, right? It's saying, okay, so ul, which is this thing, dot children dot length. Okay, cool. What is the ul children dot length? It should loop through, right, each one of them. Well, let's take a look, right? So what is that value? So if I do console dot log, and if I put in ul dot children dot length, I want to print out that number. We should see the number come up. It says 5. Well, we're getting 5 back. Here, look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's actually returning 5, but we're getting 2 of them that look like this, and 2 of them that look like this. And that's like undesirable. That's not cool either, right? I'm just showing you different ways of doing this. Okay, so what if I didn't do it this way? There's other for loops. What about if I use a for each? So if I go to for each, that's another option. For each gives me the array first, so ul dot child nodes. Let's try child nodes again. Here's child nodes. And for each, we'll call it child. For each child in child nodes, then console log that child itself. I want to print out the child itself. Okay, that's another way of doing it. For each child in child nodes, it's so kind of a weird way of doing a for each, right? But what it's doing is it's iterating through each of the nodes in the child nodes array or list. That's what it's doing. It's iterating through. We're naming each of the elements inside this collection as child every time. And you've seen this pattern in C#. You've seen it in Java. The only thing you haven't seen is this ugly thing, right? This. And what this is like replacing function. If I hover over, actually, it does this. Look. That's what it replaces. So I can replace this fat arrow function, right, with exactly what it shows here. Function child. Like this. Look. That's equivalent. Okay? So I could leave it like this if this makes more sense. Okay, so let's see what happens here. I get the same list as before, right? It loops through. I'm using a for each loop. It loops through, and it gives me all these elements. All right? Cool. What about, instead of using child nodes, I used children. Can it still do it? And if I loop through, you can see now I'm getting an uncaught error. For each is really for an array, but not an HTML collection. Okay, for an HTML collection, you need to use something totally different. So let's do it again. You can do a for in. Here's a for in. And a for in is not for HTML collections or arrays. It's actually to loop through objects. If I create an object, I can compare that if that object has a property of that type, then I can loop through. So this is definitely the wrong looping structure, for in. But there's also a new one for HTML5 and ES5 called for of, which does this actually. For of. And then the iterator, that's the child, right? And then the object, well, that's like ul.childNodes, right? And then I can do the same thing as before. I can say console.log and then child, right? And see what I get there when I do that. I get this. Same thing I got before, same for loop. However, you're going to notice when I do ul.children, this gives you a different result. This gives you this. And my friends, I want this. This is what I want, right? So if I'm looping through a structure like a list item array, I want to use for of. It's the proper structure. I can strip out the excess stuff that I don't need. It's a really good structure for me to use because now I get back each of these items back individually. And because they're individual, I can shut them all down. Let's suppose I want there to be none of them up there. I can sit there and go, well, okay, child. I want to display, right? So I want to display something different. So I can say child.style.display is equal to none. And I can turn off the entire nav bar. You see? The entire nav bar can be turned off this way. Okay, so let's see if that works. So if I save it and go back, well, guess what? There's no nav bar anymore. And if I just take this away for a second, you can see that there's literally no nav bar. I've taken away the UL elements. They're actually still there if I do an inspect. So if I go back to inspect and I look at the elements at the top of the page, you can see that inside the body in my nav, it didn't delete them, right? So here's my nav, right? And in my nav, here's my UL, and here's all my list items. But guess what? You've got a style embedded that says style display is equal to none. So they're there, they're just not visible. So why is this really good? Well, I want to log in. When I log in, I'm going to display that please log in. But when I'm logged in, I don't want you to show log in. I want to show log out. So one of them, when I'm not logged in, log out is showing. And log in, when I'm not logged in, log in is showing, but log out is hidden, right? It's still there, part of my structure of my page, but it's hidden. And then when I log in, log out is showing because I'm already logged in. I got to log out, right? Also, I may also show things like your information. Welcome, Tom. You might see that, right? So I might show that only when I'm logged in. When I'm not logged in, that part is hidden or not even included, all right? So this is a use case for can display none, right? That's pretty cool. So that's something that I can do. So I did that. I affected all of them, but I only want to affect the last one. So how do I affect the last one without doing a for loop? Remember this? ul.children. And then the last one, style display is equal to none. Let's see if I can do this. I'm just going to comment this out for now, right? So again, I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to go toggle block comment, Shift Alt A, which makes this happen. Shift Alt A. And now I want to do the same thing. I want to say that, okay, ul.children, that's the right one, how about last child? Is that possible? Can I do last child? No. How about, I want to do length, right? I can do that. I can say, well, the length, right, -1 is the one I want. So children, right? And then in brackets, ul.children. Let's see if I can do this. Children.length, and then -1, right? I want that one itself, just try and do that, to be turned off. Style.display is equal to none. That is kind of what I'm hoping, right? This is what I'm hoping to do, right? But remember what I said. This is not, children is not a collection. Children is, well, it's a collection, but it's not a node list or an array. So this may not function. And if I go back, you can see that, yeah, I mean, I'm supposed to turn off the last one, but the last one is on, right? And in fact, I get on a console log, it says, cannot read property 4 of undefined, right? So how does that mean? What does that mean? Well, because I'm saying the length of children is 5, -1 is 4, and I'm trying to access the 4th child, and I can't. It's not possible. So that's not the way to do it, right? Not when I want to do this. So what other thing can I do? How can I do like last child? Oh man, now you come back to the other option, which is not doing this. I'm just going to comment this out as wrong. So this is not the way to do it. How do I do it? If I just want to get the last child, but only the last child. I mean, I could use a for loop and going, if the child is the last one, is like, you know, child count or whatever. I could do it this way, but that's a really long way of doing it. So the other thing is, I want to look at my UL, right? And I want to look at the last child. So what is the last child? Remember, we kind of did this last time. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to say console log ul.lastchilds. And let's see what I get. I get this. Man, that's not what I want. That points to, right, that funky element that I'm not interested in ever seeing again, right? That doesn't help me whatsoever, right? It actually shows me contact, like previous sibling is contact, and this one represents the last child, which is the one that I want, right, which is the contact us page. So that is the last child, but it's the wrong thing, the wrong format. This is the object that I'm getting. Is there something else I can do with last child? Like, does it allow me to do something else? Like, for example, can I get, remember this? Can I get something like the HTML, inner HTML? Can I do this somehow? Is the inner HTML available? Well, no, it's not. So I can't do it that way. So last child doesn't work. How about first child? What is that? Does that give me the same thing as the other one? So I'm just trying this out so we can experiment, because you're gonna go through this thing, and you can see that first child, ul.firstChild, doesn't even exist. It's undefined. That's interesting. How about last element child? How about that one? What does that give us? We kind of looked at this last time. Well, that's something that makes sense. There's my content. This is the one I want, right? So I want to get this one, then style.display is equal to none. I can do this, and then just get rid of the brackets, because that's what I want to do to the last child. That makes more sense. And now we can see that if I go to my page, we should not see contact. Contact is hidden, right? Whereas if I look inside here, you can see that the contact has the style of display none, right? So I've targeted that. So again, I think there's the lesson from this for you guys is that sometimes JavaScript's naming system is deceptive, right? Last element child, last child, first child. What the heck does all that stuff mean? Well, if you look it up, you can get a documentation online of what that all is. But anything that you can dream of, if you can want to do it procedurally or programmatically, can be done, right? If I want to turn an element off or turn an element on, if I want to access a piece of style for the last element, like for example, let's say I want to make the child itself, the last child, right? And I want to turn on the font weight. So style.font weight, right? Is that possible? Font weight. And I want it to be equal to like bold, right? So is that possible? Is that okay, right? Can I make it bolder than the rest? And yeah, I did. Look, see how it's bolder? How about the font color? I want to change that color itself. I want to say ul.last_element_child, last_element_child.style. The color, so color, right, that's going to be equal to white, if I can spell, which it looks like I can't. And yeah, let's see if that works, if white works. And no, it doesn't. So why not? Why didn't it turn to white? I mean, I did it right, didn't I? How about if I made it blue or some other color? Why is it being overridden by what I'm doing? It's not turning white at all. Well, because the styles are overriding it, right? The styles that I have are preventing me, when I'm rendering this thing, to change the color, right? The color's already is being overwritten by the CSS. Remember, specificity says that CSS will take over most of the time. Now I could override this, but it'll be more code. And what does this look like anyway? So if I inspect this element, you can see that it goes right in here and it says, this item. And it goes like this. It says that contact, font weight bold, color is blue, right? And if I click onto it, it shows me the color is blue. This is the actual element, right? Look, the color is blue, right? And one thing that you can do is you can monkey around with this stuff, like right here. Let's bring this thing to the bottom to make it easier for me to show you. So here's this. Here is my style I'm influencing. And watch the boldness change here locally. So I can just click it on and click it off, right? So I can actually physically try some CSS stuff down here based on what I've written. And hell, if I want to try it, what if instead of font weight bold, I want to take this out? I can like physically go in here in my code and then take this out. Style is equal to nothing. I don't want to even have font weight in there, like this, and then press enter. Well, yeah, I can take it away permanently. I can actually modify my and try stuff out here inside the console to see what it looks like up here. When I refresh the page, it's going to come back, but I can make temporary changes down here to affect the entire page. Okay? Same thing with if I actually go in here and change something from a CSS perspective. Okay, I want to change my CSS, right? So I go back and I want to add a CSS element, and let's call it color blue. But I want to make the color important. Remember, I can do this. I can say that, I can say important. Remember how I can do this? Important, right? And then, it's in there, but still nothing, right? Why is that? Because this style is being overwritten. Remember the way cascading style sheets work is it's specific. The last cascade, the last style is going to change this thing. However, one way I could do it is using CSS. So remember, I have a CSS, kind of a style sheet, which is in content, app.css. And if I target an ID of contact, so say something with an ID of contact, right? I want the color to be blue, right? And if I did this, it's more specific, but however, still, it's not being accessed. And you can see that it's happening twice, right? So even if I refresh the page, you can see that even if I've changed it, it's not changing, right? Okay, color blue, and like I said before, important. Oh. Gotta put the important tag in there. I think it's important. There, important. Which basically says override the previous style, but not going to happen. Why? Because of how Bootstrap works. And you have to understand what I'm trying to affect. I'm trying to affect the list item. The list item is what I'm hooking into. But remember, the list item also has an anchor tag, right? The anchor tag, an ID of contact with an anchor tag of A, right? Containing an anchor tag of A, right? I can keep on going down the list until I specifically target that particular thing. It's the anchor tag I got to change, not the list item, and that's not why it's not working. Okay? That's a CSS thing, by the way. This has nothing to do with JavaScript, right? So, but I can test it here. This is the effect I want, right? Let's even take the important away, right? So here, let's take the important away. Try it. Still, we're still good. Still works, right? So this is what I want, but we want it on the anchor tag, not on the other thing. So how do I do that? Let's take this away. Go back to my JavaScript, and I want my UL last child element, right? Okay. How do I affect the anchor tag? We know that the list item is the last child element. How do I affect the anchor tag that's inside the LI? How do I affect that? Come on, guys. Let's use some intuition here, because you might get this on the test next week, right? So here, remember, this is the actual list item. The list item has an anchor tag inside of it, right? I want to target the anchor tag, not the list item. So remember, I can go like dot, and I have a bunch of stuff that comes in here. Now, one of them is inner HTML. This allows me to change my inner HTML completely. I can rewrite stuff with inner HTML. And then I can scroll down, and I can do I can add a child, right? I can go down to the stuff we did before, right? Children, remember this? Children. And I want to change the last element like this, UL last element. Well, I can kind of do that. UL last element child. Now, is there another element in my list item? I have an LI, an anchor tag. Inside the anchor tag, there is a text file, a text document, and then beside the list item, at the same level as list item is, or inside of that, is a I tag. Remember? So, again, I'm just trying to get you guys to remember what it looks like in the image, in the HTML. So here's my HTML, and here's what I'm targeting. So here's my list item. Inside the list item, there's an anchor tag. Inside the anchor tag, there's an I tag. So could I not just put last item again? What I mean by that is, can I just not do last element child, last element child? Can I do that? Right? Dot style dot color is equal to, I don't know, blue. Is that possible? Is that okay? Yeah. Right? Why is that? Because, well, take a look, right? I mean, here's my HTML, right? So my last element child of the UL is this, right? But this itself is a parent of other items, like the anchor tag. The anchor tag is inside of it. So technically, it's the last element child of the list item, right? And I don't care what's inside of that because the I tag is inside of the anchor tag. So I'm not ever going to get to the I tag unless I go last element child, last element child, last element child, right? That would be the element inside of the, I mean, that'd be weird to do, but just saying. Like these are ways of doing it, right? So that's how I can affect the actual object. And sometimes what happens, remember this, always remember this. God, I feel like I'm doing like the Princess Bride. Always remember this, right? Never forget this. The CSS only works on elements that it makes sense. So if I target something with a style, and that style I'm trying to apply to an element does not make sense for that element, CSS and HTML will ignore it completely. He'll just like say, well, I don't care. You can tell me whatever you want to do, but that style tag doesn't make any sense, so it's not going to work. So that's why I had to do this. Okay? Examples. These are all more and more examples of ways of influencing your DOM. And I wanted to spend some time doing that with you guys because I know you're going to get there again. Okay? You're going to get there again. And I'm going to ask you to do something, and you're not going to know how to do it. And the right way of thinking about it is, how do I iterate through items inside of my DOM? How do I do that? What is a way of doing that? If I'm going to iterate, this might be a good way. For of. For example, I want to iterate through the entire document, the entire HTML document, starting from the body tag. I can use for of and just iterate through the entire thing if I really want to, right? Okay, so cool. But we wanted to talk about a couple things today. One of them was ECMAScript 6 and splitting across different files, right? So what if, just saying, I want to create a class. How do I do classes in other languages? Actually, let me bring you back to typescriptlang.org, which is a really great reference site. Typescriptlang.org. Come there with me. Transport yourself to typescript.org for just a second. And I'm going to go to my playground for a second, and I'm just going to wipe out my playground. So I'm going to click on playground, and one day when it decides to answer me, it's going to go here, and we're going to be good. I'm just going to remove all this stuff so you see this. Here's a thing to notice, right? In my playground, they've really advanced my TypeScript playground, and I explained what TypeScript was before. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, which I highly recommend for solid web applications. And again, Microsoft uses it on the front end for Angular and React on the Facebook side. It's a great little tool set, but you need to transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript. However, where this really helps is if I can picture myself writing something in ECMAScript 6. So ECMAScript 6 syntax, I'm going to write on the left, and it's going to pump out ECMAScript 5 old syntax on the right. You can configure this here. If I go here, the target can be whatever I want it to be. So for example, I can configure ECMAScript 5 to come out. Guys, this is super useful when it comes to if you can't remember how to do classes on JavaScript, I mean, it's perfect. Okay, so I don't care about the other stuff right now. I just care about the target. Cool. Let's start writing on the left. Let's start writing class. And this is the way you write a new class in ECMAScript 6. Remember, ECMAScript was the foundation for all of JavaScript. It's a language that JavaScript's been based on. And like I said before, history of ECMAScript, the way it worked was back in the day, they started kind of reinventing JavaScript and improving it. And this around 2015 timeframe, that was the target. They actually announced it earlier, like in 2014 and in 2013. But they said by 2015, ECMAScript 6, the next version of JavaScript is going to come out. And then they realized that, it's a bad naming convention, and we're going to say ECMAScript 2015, 2016, 2017, all the way to 2020 now, right? It's just the next version of JavaScript that's coming out. And they do have 2020. So what it did was it says, we're going to add additional features every single year and improve JavaScript so that it's cross-platform. It gives us a robust set of features, and so that way we can build full web applications with JavaScript because it's the right way to do things. But I want to target the old version, and I've done that by using config. I'm going to start typing the word class. So this is the way you do classes in ECMAScript 6, or the latest version of JavaScript. You type the word class, and then you type the name of the class. We'll type the name person. We kind of did this example already, but let's do it again. Take a look at the right again. So this is an example of how a class would be written by hand if I was writing it with ECMAScript 5, the old JavaScript 5, basically, right? Now, without this comment, just ignore the comment for a second. But basically, it looks like this. There's an IFI. Here's your IFI right here. And the IFI is named person is equal to this IFI as an example, right? Here's the IFI. And the IFI even has an extra bracket on the outside and an extra bracket on the back side, all right? So it's an IFI, okay? Just pointing this out for you, right? And then inside the IFI, there's another function. And that function that's inside the IFI is named the same thing as the IFI function itself, person. And this, my friends, is the constructor right here. So when I do constructor, if I type in the word constructor is the new keyword for ECMAScript 6, the new version of JavaScript, which is understood by all browsers pretty much now. As I can say constructor. And if I do one of these, you can see that my constructor function is totally valid. It's this way. Nothing has changed on the right because this is the constructor. If I put comments around it, if I say this is the constructor function, you can see where it's going. It's going right here, right? So in order for me to make a constructor in ECMAScript 5, I have to do this structure here. And notice there's also this return person. So what return person does is it allows the person constructor to escape the IFI. So I can say something like person dot, and then person would be available, right? Person dot something. All right, and if I want to describe properties, right, I could say something like this. I could say that I have two properties. One of them is age, and the other one is name. So name, right, that's a property, and I'll say let name, okay? That's a thing I could do. But then, well, we get into some really weird stuff, like that's not how you do it in the latest version of ECMAScript 6. How I actually do it is something like this. This dot name, and I pass in name and age, and I say something like this. Well, this dot name is equal to name, and this dot age is equal to age. And that's how I do it. Now notice I'm getting errors here, but I'm not getting errors over there because, remember, I'm just using this as a platform to write good code. This is actually how it looks. Look, see, this is the real way. If I was to take this code right now, the way it is, and transport it into my JavaScript, right? And let's also make a little method. The method is going to, just ignore the errors here for a second. The method is going to be called says hello. Says hello, right? And I'm going to say this method says hello is going to say something like console.log, and then the name, this dot name, plus says hello. Okay, cool. So take a look at this, right? Now I got this really funky syntax going on. Person.prototype.sayshello. So I want you to think about the prototype keyword, you know, in C++, what it would look like. : It's like you're saying that the says hello function belongs to the person prototype. That's what we're saying here. So we're saying that person prototype, let's add a new function called says hello. It's gonna point to an anonymous function, right, that does this functionality. So funky syntax, guys. Like ECMAScript 5, when we were writing classes in ECMAScript 5, it was pretty ugly. Like, you know, it got pretty ugly like this. Not great is what I'm saying, right? I don't want to write classes like this anymore. This is bad. But however, I want to talk about this. Let's take this, port it right into our code right now. Let's do it. See what happens. So I'm going to take this class, just this part right here, including the var. Oh my God, right? var. Oh, it's like I feel like I'm fighting vampires when I look at var, right? Take the var and everything else, copy it, go back to our code, and way at the top, outside of the IFI, and outside underneath this use strict, put that in. See what happens. Like this. I just teleported it in. Okay? Question. now that I've defined this, can I use it here in my code? Let's see. So inside of my start function, way at the bottom down in here, I'm going to define a person called Tom. So I'll say let Tom is equal to a person. And if I open the brackets, it tells me Tom takes age and name, or name and age. So it's, oops. Tom takes, what the heck? I'm going all crazy over here. Tom and my age, I don't know, I'll use 30 for now because I feel like it, right? Not true. And then I want to say Tom dot says hello, right? Notice I get like no code hinting whatsoever for my class at all. No code hinting. Even though I wrote it nicely and everything else. Doesn't matter. And let's check this out. If I run this, it should say Tom says hello, right? Yeah.
Should we change the var person to let person? Because you have
Absolutely. That's wrong. I'm showing you that it can't be transported in here. Yeah, but you can totally change to let for sure. That's definitely something I want.
Because I know you prefer
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yes, please do, right? Anyways, when I go back and I go back to my page here, you can see that in the console, it says, cannot set proper name of undefined. A person and the start. What? What do you mean it's not defined? I defined it nicely. Hey, look, I said let Tom is equal to person. I got to use the keyword new. And if I use the keyword new, it activates the constructor. And now I'm OK. Tom says hello. Tom says hello is written badly. Let's fix that part. Sorry, I'll fix it in a second. It's just Tom space says hello. And then this is what it looks like. So here I'm using the new keyword. I'm allocating memory and getting a reference to this new object called person. And I'm giving a reference and I'm holding it back in Tom. Tom now represents a new an instance of the person class, right? And Tom can say hello. Tom says hello. Yay. All right, but inheritance kind of works funny in ECMAScript 5. Inheritance is like this, like extra stuff, right? And it's pretty long. It's pretty darn long to make inheritance work. But it's just way easier to use ECMAScript 6 for inheritance. Let me show you ECMAScript 6 inheritance and how I'd rewrite this class. If I was going to rewrite this class, so this is the old way of doing it, and let's just comment this whole thing out. So I'm just going to comment out. So again, I'm going to go to toggle block comment. So now that's not commented out. Sorry, it's because of this. Right, let's try that again. It's Shift-Alt-A. Shift-Alt-A. Okay, it's commented out. Let's rewrite this thing like ECMAScript 6 style, right? So ECMAScript 6, new version of JavaScript. By the way, ECMAScript 5, from a compatibility, 99.99% of browsers compatible, right? The only one that's kind of iffy on, again, no pun intended, is old IE, right? We don't want to use IE anyway. Don't recommend. Don't tell your friends about it. Make sure it doesn't exist for them, IE. And same thing with old versions of other browsers. Like, for example, Opera. It's been improved, but still, I always look at it like, they could have done more with Opera. And if you're using a Mac, if you're a Mac person, then again, I don't recommend Safari. Safari's kind of been left, by the wayside. It hasn't been improved by Apple so much lately. But the two that are pretty much up to standards are Chrome and Firefox. Some people prefer Firefox because you're not getting spied on as much by Google. I don't know. I think you're being spied on all the time anyway, right? That's just me. So so I don't use the other ones. And for this course, I'm going to focus primarily on Chrome because it's the most compatible browser across every platform. So I can use class this time. So class, like we did before, person. Let's just write this. This is a fully acceptable thing to do. And just like we did in our code up online, I can say that the constructor, here's my constructor. I can pass in name and age. This is totally valid. And I can say that this dot name is equal to name, and this dot age is equal to age. I can totally do this. And then at the bottom of my constructor, I can say something that looks like, says hello. that is something that is a function, and I'm going to say that console log. I can use something called template strings in ECMAScript 6, and they look like this. Backtick, right? $, curly brace, right? This dot name says hello, right? That is a totally valid thing to do. All right, cool. So I saved that, and that's my person class, and it's way easier to write, and it doesn't look as ugly as this. I don't have to use my iffy, an extra iffy, and it's just cleaner. That's the latest version of JavaScript. Cool? Does it work? Let's see. If I go back to here, Tom says hello. We're good to go. Look, Tom says hello. Let's take it further. If I want to, inherit from one class to the other, I can simply do this. I can say that, let's keep this, and let's go down to the next one. I can say that now I want to make a student class, like I did before. So class student extends person, and then I can have a constructor function. Because I'm using a constructor function of student and it extends person, I must call the superconstructor to pass in and satisfy its requirements. So again, I'm going to say that I want name, I want age, and I want student ID. And I need to call the superconstructor and pass in name and age to that. By a minimum, I need to do this. Why? Because this is inheriting from person, and I must satisfy the person's constructor class, right? Constructor function. And then I can do this dot student ID is equal to student ID. Now, there's a question. There's something that might be burning in your head. And when I was first learning JavaScript, it was burning in my head. And let's see if you have the same question as I do. So I want to say is studying, and I can just simply console log backtick $, curly brace, name, which is this dot name, right? With a student ID of $, curly brace, right? This dot student ID is studying. Okay, so again, I'm using something called template strings. Template strings is a new construct of ECMAScript 6. In ECMAScript 5, I would have to do string concatenation, where I take one string plus my number, and then it converts. All right, but this works great. Okay. All right, cool. So I want to make Tom a student, not just a person. A person is pretty abstract. A person is pretty generic. Doesn't really tell me too much about Tom, but student is an identifier. It tells me that Tom is a specific type of person. He's a student, let's just say. So if I scroll down, then I can change Tom from a person to a student, right? And I just have to pass in a student ID to satisfy the requirements. Here's my student ID. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8. And I can do Tom says hello as well as Tom is studying, because Tom is both a person and also a student. And this is a clear example of how inheritance would work here in ECMAScript 6, which is the way we're going to use it going forward. Are we clear on this? Inheritance. So if I kind of go here, you can see that I get the exact response I expect. Tom says hello. Tom with the student ID of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A is studying. Okay, so nothing too exciting here. But one thing we've talked about is this idea of syntax, better syntax for ECMAScript 6. Typescript takes it one step further in that, again, if I go to Typescript, I can change my target back to ECMAScript 2015, let's say. That's ECMAScript 6. So notice that it switches back to this nice format, which is what we just used, right? And what I want to do instead, when I do this, ECMAScript 2015, and even if I go further, let's go to ECMAScript 2020. It doesn't matter. If I use the latest version of ECMAScript, it's still going to look the exact same, right? Which is good. But technically, TypeScript is taking it one step further, and this is why TypeScript is still awesome. One day, we won't need TypeScript. We will need to transpile from this really new fandangled language to JavaScript. We can do this. We can say name. I can declare two variables, two private instance variables. So here are private instance variables. I can declare two of them, name, which is of string type, right? And I can say that age, which is of number type, right? And typically what I want to do with private instance variables, I like to put some kind of, my own convention is an underscore, all right? So you can kind of do something like this. Name and age kind of show me an underscore. Now, if I hover over, it says name has no initializer and is not signed. Well, because I've done this, I've changed it around. I can say that the name parameter now is of type string. And the age parameter is of type number. Okay, string and number. And then I can say this dot underscore name and this dot underscore age is equal to name and age. Here, you can see what's happened. It's got a shorthand. I never did this step because modern JavaScript still doesn't understand type, which I highly don't like, right, as a programmer. I do understand why it's there. I understand it provides flexibility and it provides a different way of coding. I still don't like it. All right, and then in my says hello function, I can still use template strings just like I can with ECMAScript 6. So I can sit there and say, okay, instead of using this, let's just redo this. I can say that backtick, right? So $ curly brace, this dot underscore name, right? I can say that says hello, says hello. Actually, I should probably close it off. How about that? Says hello, right? So you can see that it keeps it, right? Because this is the latest version of JavaScript. So it's okay, it's compatible. Where I made advancements is up here, right? But you know what? We do this all the time. And in TypeScript, we do something like this. We take in a parameter and we assign it. We initialize it to some kind of private instance variable. So TypeScript, if you're not going to do anything else, TypeScript has a shortcut for this, a total shortcut that does the exact same thing. Take a look at the right. It's not going to change anything on the right. But here's a shortcut for how it would really look in TypeScript. Get rid of this. And inside the constructor, just name them public. And then I don't have to do this anymore at all. And that's TypeScript. It makes JavaScript easier, right? Much easier. And we're going to use this later on in the semester, but you're also going to use it if you're going to pursue web development in Angular and in Node and in other places. You're going to see this kind of structure over and over again because it's easy, it's quick, and it's efficient. Okay, so same thing on the right side. This is ECMAScript 6. You can see that it just writes perfect JavaScript, right? And I encourage you to do that. If you forget how to do something on a test, my tests are all going to be open book. Go to typescriptlang.org, type in your stuff that you think is good. It's going to translate over to ECMAScript 5. Good to go. You can look like a JavaScript ninja, right? No problem, even if you're not. All right, and there's lots of other stuff online that does this. There's also Babel. I got to mention another transpiler. So if I go Babel, right, and then this is Babel, you know, for JavaScript, right? And if you look at babeljs.io, right, what it does is something similar, right? So I put next-gen JavaScript in here, and it transpiles it to browser-compatible JavaScript over here. One day, Babel will not be required, just like TypeScript. Babel is another way of doing it. For example, some people just don't like TypeScript because it's a whole other language. So they type their latest version of JavaScript here, or maybe something that, like with emojis, something that's compatible, and then it does something that's compatible on the right-hand side here. So it's really, really cool. Babel is another way of doing it. What was that? Oh, yeah. I mean, again, it's kind of cool. You can also look at documentation for how to set Babel up. It's a very common framework to set up, and it works really nicely with React React is, uses Babel extensively instead of using TypeScript. All right, so that's another option that we can use. And we can always test stuff out here and try it out there and see what it looks like. So next level stuff here and try it out over here. Okay, so that's Babel for you, which is pretty cool. You can also, where it says try it out, it'll actually allow you to write code here and do stuff there. You can actually have the same kind of options on the left-hand side. Look, it'll even convert to TypeScript. So even there, right, if you really want to. So again, if I was going to convert this to TypeScript, I can write some code here. Let's say I say TypeScript. If I click on TypeScript, and I don't want React, right? And look, it says like stage 2. I don't care about stage 2. Let's use ECMAScript 2017, which is what I want. So that's what our presets are. And then I want to kind of write good code. I can just type in class and then person. And I can start, as I type, you can see that it's starting to do the exact same thing as I did before in its own funky way that's more compatible. Constructor, and I'll say name and age. And then I'll say this dot name is equal to name, and this dot age is equal to age. You can see the same thing happening over here, right? But I've got this additional workflow up here. And the reason why Babel does it this way, as opposed to the way that TypeScript does it, is it's trying to keep super compatible, like 100% compatible, right? And TypeScript can do this too. If you go back to TypeScript, and if I was to inherit from person, take a look at the inheritance happening in ECMAScript 5. So I want to inherit, I want to make a student, just like I did before. Let's type it with TypeScript way. Class student extends. Once I use the extends keyword, bad things happen. Person. And now, if I go back to ECMAScript 2015 instead of, ECMAScript 5, you can see what happens. It creates this crazy structure, right? Which is 99% compatible with everything else. But one thing that you're going to notice when you go there is it uses var. Var. Whenever you say var, say it like this. Var. Because you should be angry you're using var. You should be disgusted to use var. Var is a bad word now. Yes?
That'd be the thing TypeScript could add.
What's that?
That's something TypeScript could add.
What?
Just say don't translate and not make it var.
Make it
Translate,
let.
Make it let.
Yeah, you can, but then if you're using let, then you might as well use ECMAScript 6. Because then it's compatible. Let only is available in ECMAScript 6 and higher, right? Before that, let and const didn't exist, right? Here's something else that you can also test. Whenever you're testing compatibility, and we have to talk about this because compatibility is a thing that we have to always worry about, especially with like handheld browsers. Some handheld browsers, aren't compatible as much with HTML5 and the latest versions of JavaScript as for everything else. So try this out on your handheld browser. Go to html5test.com. So if I go to my browser here, it's going to detect Chrome, right? And when it detects Chrome, one day, it's going to try and detect which browser it is. I'm going to use my phone at the same time. Let's see if I can do my phone. And I'll give you what it shows me on my phone while this is working. And it could be working hard because I'm broadcasting live on the internet too. Let's try it. HTML5 test.com.
This is Windows Explorer level waiting time.
Is it holding for you too?
No.
You're not using Windows Explorer, are you?
No. Just your taking a look.
Yeah, mine's taking a while. Sometimes what it is because I'm broadcasting live. I'm doing a lot of stuff with my machine, so
Mine doesn't do it either.
Yeah, mine's not good.
it's not working at all.
Either end. Yeah.
Maybe it's just here, school.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe the school's blocking. Anyways, that's okay. But if you try html5test.com, then a lot of times it'll tell you how much support you have for HTML5. Normally that's pretty cool. The other one you can test is can I use. Try that one. Caniuse.com. Caniuse.com tells me the latest versions of JavaScript. So if I type the word in let, right, you can see that let and what the compatibility is across different browsers and different frameworks. This is really cool. I love this site. So it looks like, okay, so old IE, like it looks like it says partial support for old IE for let, right? You know, it says first variables are not bound separately to each iteration of for loops. All right, so some partial support. But notice it's good for the latest version of Edge with Windows 10, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Opera, blah, 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 right? And all browsers on every device. Okay, this is all good on every device. How about the keyword class? So if I type the keyword class, you can see that I'm getting pretty good support on everything now for class, right? And you can see, by the way, how much support I get worldwide. Globally, I'm getting 97.97% support for the class keyword. That's pretty safe to me. I mean, most markets are going to allow you to use, you know, the class keyword to make your own classes in JavaScript. And I think it's safe now. Back in the day, you know, a few years ago, 5 years ago, it wasn't so safe. Now it's pretty good, right? And any new feature you want, right, you can type it in here and try it out, and you can see if it's safe to use, okay? By the way, if you just take that away and go back, right, and if I go back to home, you can see that there's a bunch of different features you can look at. So you can say, you can look at latest features if you want to. Here are the most searched for features, like Flexbox. That's a new version of CSS that we can use for, instead of the way it does grids. By built in, Flexbox is something fairly new. Not so new, it's been around for a few years now. But that's one thing, so Flexbox. And the other one is WebAssembly, right? So WebAssembly is kind of a new thing. So if I go WebAssembly, there's WebAssembly. Let's type in WebAssembly. So WebAssembly is something that's happening, that's been happening lately. It's kind of a revolution where we can program in assembly code, right? So bytecode basically, and it'll run nicely in the browser. This is awesome, guys. This means one day, and one day soon, there are going to be tools to allow us to write things in C++ easily. You can still do it now within Scriptum and Binarian. There's an actual library you can download for C++. I can write things in pure C++, and it'll output to web, which is cool, right? So you were like, I don't feel like writing in JavaScript, and it's okay because you can just translate it to WebAssembly and we're good to go, right? So it's coming. Really great things about this for the future of JavaScript for us is, great thing about it is JavaScript's going to be around for a while anyway because it still needs to support WebAssembly, because WebAssembly is just going to be a package that gets kind of loaded in the background for now. And the great thing is execution times. If my Chrome can run WebAssembly and the latest version in the browser, that means it can run very, very quickly. I can run full games, you know, kind of thing, like full C++ games on the browser. That's pretty awesome. That means I've unlocked the ability for me to make games for different platforms, right? If that's what you're interested in doing. So WebAssembly. And there's many, many other things you could test here if you're not sure if something works. Like for example, if you want to do a for each, I can type in for each, and you can see that the node list API for each is there, right? You can go scroll down and you can see other ones for each, right? And there's different kinds of for each loops for different things that it will support, okay? And some support is there, other places. The audio param map API for each is not supported. How about module? So if I type the word module, is that supported? And you can see that dynamic imports are supported across more than one platform, right? Here is what is starting to be supported, the script tag. So script type is module. That is being supported across most browsers now, right? So look at all the latest versions of Chrome. Opera Mobile, no. Opera Mini, no. And, you know, this browser for Android, no. But for Chrome, Android, and for Firefox for Android, and you know, for other things, we're pretty good. Some other ones, no. So there's some browsers, but for worldwide, the script tag with a module on it is 88.28% compliant across the world, right? And so sometimes we need to do that when we look at new features that are in ECMAScript 6. If I scroll down, it'll also talk about things like known issues. What are the known issues of using such a thing, this feature? Module preload, something that's coming up, not really supported very much right now. It's only 66% support across all browsers. Add module, not really supported. No module, not really supported. Not really great support. And you can see a bunch of other ones. So please test your features out with caniuse.com if you're not sure if your feature is compatible. Okay, so kind of really cool. And again, we can look at other words that we know work, like extends, the extends keyword. That works, right? Extends, classes, right? Again, only 89.48%, definitely not compatible with old IE. So if you're trying to support an older browser, this is where Babel and TypeScript take, kind of reign true. Why? If I'm supporting an older legacy browser, IE, let's suppose used somewhere in a bank or other large enterprise, right, where they don't want to upgrade their Windows 7 systems or something like that. It's still a thing, right? Or other smaller companies, let's say a manufacturing company that has an old machine that's running Windows 98 still, right? And it's running solid, and they're not going to replace it, but they still want to access the internet once in a while. You write a site, it's not compatible with those old browsers. Now, you may not care, but it really depends on who your audience is when you make your website, okay? So that's kind of something we have to look at when it comes to this stuff, and that's why these other things exist, okay? One more thing before we go today, and I want to talk about how do I split my code across different files? What do I do, right? So right now I have my class, and it's inside the same code. It's like right here at the top of my code, I got another class. And this is really difficult to maintain. I got like everything in one big file. Not really cool. How do I extend it? What do I do? Well, the easiest thing to do is make another file. Let's do that first. So go here, and under scripts, I'm going to make another file. Let's call this file person.js. So here's my person.js class, and then I want to take that class definition that I had before. So I'm going to go back into app.js, and I don't care about this anymore. Let's get rid of this. I want to take this person class and not the student class, just the person class for now. Take this person class and just drop it in. Okay, cool. And let's do the same thing for the student class. So I'm going to go new file, student.js. There it is. And go in here and grab this student class and kill it and go back up to my student and paste it. And there it is. I've saved everything. Let's make sure everything is saved. Saved. Cool. In order for us to make this work, the first thing we need to do is realize that my index.html, by default, without any additional module loaders, right? Because sometimes you can use something called module loading. Without any additional details, I need to load my scripts in order. Order matters. Why? I'm using the let keyword when I use classes in your mind, right? So it's like I want to do this. I want to define new script, source, and I want to say that I want to do ./scripts/person. So my person.js comes first. And then the same thing goes with source. The same thing goes with /scripts/student. But now we're going to have a bit of an issue. So I've loaded them up. Remember that person and student get loaded directly into line 48 and 49, right? So I've loaded them up in order. That's important to note, right? In my app.js now, are they available? Can I still do this at the bottom? That's the key, right? So if I run this thing now, how does it run? Does it run okay, right? So going back to this, yeah, we're good to go. And that's the way you split across files. Very, very simple. Okay, so totally fine. Questions for what I talked about today. So I covered all kinds of stuff. Mostly, I did a review of DOM again and some more manipulation to help you with your Lab 1. And also is going to help you with your Test 1 coming up next week, 1 week from tomorrow. Again, on Monday next week, we'll do a bit of a review, and I'll answer questions that you have regarding your test. That's coming up. Okay? So that's happening. Also, I want to put this up on GitHub before I go. And that's it. I can do that without you having to stay. I'm going to put this up on GitHub. Tomorrow when we come back, I'm going to continue to record, and we're going to do more ECMAScript 6 and more advanced functions than we've had before. Otherwise, thank you so much for sticking around. I'm going to stop recording now.